right now. So just want to welcome everybody to the operations work group meeting. Those people who are speaking and the board members are the only people who should have their video on. And then there are two students that we invited to this meeting who are the subject of an announcement right away. So I'd like to have their videos on. Yes, okay. Thank you. So then from here on out, we'll call you if you're a speaker. We will call you one at a time. So if you are not a board member or one of those two students, please shut off your video. Can you shut your video off, please? Sherry? Okay. Kathleen Lip, can you shut off your video, please? Okay, do I have the board on? Okay. Good. And two students? That's what we needed. Dr. Jenkins, please. Okay. Okay, all set. Thank you.
All right, are we ready?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I would like to call this meeting of the Board of Education Operation Work Group to order. Welcome everyone tonight. We are going to start with an announcement of the Student Senate election results. The Student Senate election results are in. First, the board would like to acknowledge our outgoing student representative, Namrata Pandy, and alternative student representative, Gordon Allen. This will be their final board meeting. However, they will continue to serve until the school year is over. And we thank both representatives for their hard work, determination, and commitment to our district. Are Gordon and Nama with us tonight? Our newly elected student representative for the 2022-23 school year is Joanna Hoskins, incoming senior at La Follette High School next year. Our alternative student representative will be Lavinia Volpaul, incoming junior at Memorial. Congratulations to Joanna and Lavinia. Lavinia will also serve as president of Student Senate for the 2022-23 school year. Welcome to the Board of Education. We look forward to working with you starting in the fall of 2022. Welcome.
Thank you. Can we move on to the next item?
All right. We do have one written statement that was submitted for this meeting, and it was in support of an 8% salary adjustment effective April 1st, 2022 for supportive educational employees, clerical and technical staff. A copy of the full statement is attached to this agenda item for you to review. And now we will do public appearances. And I believe we have 4 public appearances.
Our first speaker is Jennifer Rupti. Please turn on your video, Jennifer.
All right.
Yes, thank you,
Jennifer.
Okay, I am a special education assistant here for Madison. This is my 9th school year with the district. And I am in special education because I have a son with a severe disability. So I know how important this job is as an employee and a parent. I'm very concerned about the many job openings that we have in special education. We've had, like in ours, I work at one of the elementary schools. We've had a BEA position. The person left halfway through the year. It never got filled. I've heard, I know other schools have maybe possibly 2 SEA positions open, not filled. So that makes it harder for the rest of us to do our job when there's less special education assistants, less special ed teachers, and then it makes it harder for everybody else to fulfill the IEP goals and the minutes that are legal documents. And so obviously people are not applying for these jobs. People are not applying to be special education assistants because, like my son, they can go to Menards and make $19.50 full time just starting with no experience. And I've been with the district for 9 years and I'm only making $18.36. I had a 22-cent raise last fall. And this fall, where I land in the schedule, the pay schedule, I will not get any raise. So, besides, we deserve to be paid better, and we were asking for a $5 pay increase for our SEAs, BAs, 4K educational assistants, and security educational assistants. But, if there's not our support, the teachers can't teach if they don't have our support. So it's very important that we get people in our schools working in these positions. These are our most vulnerable students and they need us. And we care about our students. That's why we are here. We live and work in this community and we deserve better. We deserve better pay. Districts all around us, even in Dane County, have already committed to the 5% or 4.7% COLA for all staff. We deserve this for all staff, and $5 pay increase for our special ed assistants. We work hard, we care about our students. Our teachers need us so they can teach. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Our next speaker is Mike Lip. Jennifer, could you close? Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak. The program is listed in my wife's name. Well, so I'm not Kathleen, but I'm Mike. I taught 41 years and retired in 2015. Since then, I've been substitute teaching as I think a form of community service. That's why I do it, really. I enjoy it, and I think I do a good job at it. I wanted to speak about the state of negotiations between the district and the teachers at this point. Formulation of a budget reflects on an organization's priorities. It speaks to its culture. And in the case of MMSD, it speaks to accomplishing important educational, societal achievements, such as closing racial achievement gaps, preparing our students for post-secondary education, both in 2-year and 4-year degree programs, preparing our students for apprenticeship programs, and many, many others. In other words, preparing America's citizens. The 2022-23 MMSD budget needs tweaking, and it needs it now. No matter what the Board of Education and the administration would like to accomplish, it's the people in direct contact with the student body who make this happen. Allow me to enumerate the teachers. And when I say teachers, I mean the teachers, the counselors, social workers, psychologists, librarians, deans, and etc. The EAs and SEAs, the clerical and technical staff, the security assistants, and of course, the substitute teachers. If you mean what you say, then you've got to invest in the frontline workers of this organization. The US Department of Labor has reported that inflation is in the 8% plus area. The WERC here in Wisconsin has set the CPI for Wisconsin at 4.7%. You know this, you're all aware of this. Any raise below that isn't a raise for too many of our employees, those who are not moving steps and or lanes. And that's just not acceptable. Milwaukee has already settled for 4.7% base wage increase. Kenosha has also. So has Green Bay, so has Racine, Wanakee, Verona, Fond du Lac, Monroe, and Oshkosh. Even Pecatonica has settled for a 4.7% base wage increase for next school year. We have many problems. We can't hire enough teachers to fill the open positions in our buildings. We don't have enough EAs and SEAs. We certainly are bereft of substitutes to the point where our daily subfill rate is hovering around 50%. when it used to be about 90%. Sherman Middle School is missing 11 faculty right now. These are open positions. We have central office staff going to some of the 52 buildings daily to fill positions. Every day I work as a sub, I am asked if I will work during my prep periods and if I can come back for the rest of the week. Please, they say, today at Midville, please come back Thursday, Friday. If you want to begin the 2022-23 school year on a great footing and accomplish some of the lofty and necessary goals, direct the administration to finish the contract negotiations by offering a 4.7% raise on the base wages as soon as possible. Move the EA-SEA pay scales up $5 per hour, as you heard from the previous speaker. Index long-term substitute teacher pay to the base wage of the teacher salary schedule as it was for decades before it was uncoupled 4 years ago. It should be the base wage of teachers divided by 192. That's what long-term subs got for decades. It's not anymore. I understand the old saying, you can't get blood from a turnip. The funds needed to close the gap between MMSD's offer and 4.7% is only 1.4% of the budgeted expenditures. If now is not the time to prioritize staff who work directly with our students, I don't know when that would be. Administration has a variety of options to get this done, but they currently lack the will to do so. We ask you to provide them the motivation to do so. Thanks for your time, and I hope you can move this whole thing forward. Thank you.
Next speaker is Judy for Word Up.
Hi, Judy, are you with us? I think you're on mute. Can you take her off of mute?
She has to do that herself.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Hey, perfect. Thank you. I'm Judy Forwarda, President of the Educational Support Employees Association, the ESEA MTI Group, representing EAs, SEAs, nursing assistants, family liaisons, school security assistants, and MMSD clerical and technical employees. I've been an SEA and MMSD for over 30 years, all at Memorial High School. I've experienced a lot in those 30 years, but nothing like the past 2.5 years since the pandemic began. The fear, the anxiety, the uncertainty caused many of my colleagues to resign or retire early, including some who were forced to work in person at the MSCR cares or the threat of being fired in the fall of 2020. We've done our best to adapt to the changes being thrown to us every few weeks and sometimes every minute. I've also witnessed economic cycles, but nothing like what is happening currently. Pay has gone up considerably in many industries while our pay has stagnated. We are not offered 40 hours a week. We must carefully budget for any unpaid break periods. Because the pay and hours are not enough to live reasonably in Madison, many of my coworkers have second and third jobs. This is especially difficult for those who have families or are caretakers at home. The type of work we do as support staff in our schools maintains the highest concentration of staff of color while working directly with students all day long, and many days we go without a break. The job has become more difficult following the return to school this year. Students are hurting, staff are hurting, and many of us are required to pick up extra duty because there is not enough staff. While we appreciate the bonuses offered to some in our unit, the school secretaries and other administrative staff who support our students in schools were left out. We are hopeful that it's being rectified, but it's taking way too long. We tried to get this corrected immediately, but were ignored and denied. A request to include secretaries was sent to the board and administration immediately after the bonuses were hastily passed in November, and it was brought up many times after that. Finally, our secretaries got fed up, spoke up directly, and made it a public issue. Only then did it get addressed. We would much rather work together to keep this from happening in the future. I have recently learned that two of my colleagues who I work with all school year long and summer semester for the last several years have accepted summer positions outside of MMSD. I am afraid that they may not return to MMSD next school year. One of my coworkers has worked for MMSD for 7 years and the other one 12 years respectively. Both are educators of color, and we work so very hard together as a team with some of our most vulnerable students. They are leaving because of the pay. That is the bottom line. We have requested a $5 per hour increase to the salary schedule to all educational and security assistants. We are losing people to jobs that offer 40 hours a week, a year-round schedule, and much less taxing in what we do. After working 30 years in this position, I make less than $21 an hour. Working with students at jobs in the community, many who make more than I do. We are asking for this to ensure we can attract and hold on to good, well-trained staff to work with our teachers and students to ensure that students who need help have it available. When we are not there, when there is turnover, it directly impacts our students with consistency, compassion, and familiarity. Finally, we are asking the board to provide a $5 per hour increase to the salary schedule of all educational and security assistants and provide a 4.7 cost of living adjustment for all employee groups. By prioritizing your staff, you are prioritizing the students they serve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy.
Okay, our final speaker is Jane Ninman.
Hi, Jane, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can, yes.
Good evening, Superintendent Jenkins and the members of the Board of Education. Once again, we are gathered to ask your consideration for giving the school-based secretaries bonuses. We tirelessly show up daily to support our families and teachers. COVID has added yet another level to our already jam-packed positions, from receiving texts and emails in the evening about staff absences to working with the health office to ensure COVID positive students don't attend school. Every day is a scramble to find class coverage and to process the added payroll to those that cover. We are operating at this frenzied pace with no slowdown in sight. Our work ethic is strong, and many of us have not only showed up to do our jobs, but have served breakfast or sat in classrooms while coverage is being sorted out. When you failed to recognize our work by not including school secretaries as part of the bonus group, you sent us a message that our work is not valued, especially giving others bonuses that increase their pay so that it closely reflects our pay without giving them all the additional responsibilities that we have. Many people don't realize that in addition to processing the students' attendance, we handle purchasing for the entire building, manage multiple budgets, process 4 or more biweekly and monthly payrolls, enter contracts, and assist with building allocations. And believe it or not, we are even the backup to the school nurse. This is just the short list of responsibilities. We do these tasks with multiple interruptions and a smile on our face. Please consider granting us the maximum amount of bonus to be in line with our job tasks and duties. As we have been told multiple times, we truly are the glue that holds our schools together. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Jen.
That was our final speaker. Chris, would you invite the speakers to please leave the Zoom meeting and then go to live stream, please?
Okay. Thank you for joining us to all of the speakers. That was our last public appearance of the night. If you would like to continue to watch the meeting, if you could please exit the meeting and join us on YouTube where you will be able to watch. All right, we will move on with our agenda. We are not doing the approval of the minutes. We will do that next time. We are moving on to our 2 agenda items that we have for tonight. The first one is the continuing work on our 2022-23 budget. We will also receive an update on our 2020 referendum projects as we move from the design and project bidding phase into the construction phase at our 6 school sites and the 4 comprehensive high schools, Capitol High School, its new location, and the new Southside Elementary School. We received as a board our first draft of the budget on April 25th, and we have all had the opportunity to review the budget book individually. Tonight, we'll review revenue inputs to the budget, our excellence and equity projects, federal ESSER funding, and property tax projections. Most importantly, we want to make sure that any current questions that the board members have can get addressed as we move through the budget process. We'll also review the process for public input into the budget and any board member amendments, that process. The budget as presented is balanced, which means any additions or changes would need to be made from somewhere within the budget. The amendment timeline, just to remind board members, has a deadline of May 27th, and that is in place to make sure that Ross and his staff have time to provide us with the analysis of any impact of any suggested changes that are brought forward. And we vote on the final preliminary budget at the June 27th meeting, with the budget taking effect on July 1st. I'll just share that the good news is that compared to last year at this time, there are fewer unknowns in our budget. There are always moving pieces to the budget that get finalized in the time between June and the final budget approval in October. The bad news is that the 2022-23 budget will be the second year of the state's biennial budget that did not include any increase in the revenue limit, nor a per pupil funding increase for Wisconsin school districts. That means that the increase in revenue authority is from the addition of limited time federal COVID funds and from our taxpayer approved operating referendum from 2020. 2023 or 223 budget will be the 3rd of the 4-year referendum operating funds. And I'd like to acknowledge the support from our Madison taxpayers that has allowed us to move forward on investments we need to make in our students, our staff, and our schools. In this budget, we've also had the opportunity to make important investments with our federal funding dollars designated for the COVID recovery efforts. And as we move through the presentation tonight, there are pause points built in for questions. For our new board members, Board Member Nichols, Board Member Simpkin, welcome to your first Operations Work Group meeting. Before I turn things over to Mr. Ross McPherson for the presentation and discussion, Dr. Jenkins, do you have any opening comments you'd like to make about the budget and reference?
Yes, first of all, I'd just like to say, again, thank you to all of our board members for your participation in this and giving us the opportunity to keep coming forth with our budget. I think as we look at this budget, it really does align with our priorities and our values of what we've been trying to do. It's been a very tough budget, as you have eloquently stated, that given the support or lack thereof from the state, when we look at Joint Finance Committee, given the 0 and 0, but we've been working through it, trying to be fiscally responsible and hold up all the things and make key investments in early childhood. Like we talked about our 4K programs, we're serious about that. I think the board will also jump forward with the investment in early literacy, our textbook adoptions. As we're working through this as a team, Ross has led us, we've gone out, presenting this budget and trying to get feedback. We encourage them to continue to try to give us feedback. As we know, we have some tough fiscal challenges, but we are still making some very key investments around the things that we hold dear to our district, and looking forward to presenting tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. And with that, Ross, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Let me try that again. All right, there we go. Good evening, everyone. Again, as Krista and Dr. Jenkins gave me a brief introduction to what we're talking about tonight, we are providing an update to the board and the public tonight regarding the draft preliminary budget, which was released at the regular meeting in April. Before we begin, I do want to continue to ground ourselves on our 3 goals. Every child is on track to graduate ready for college, career, and community. The district and every school in it is a place where children, staff, and families thrive, and African-American children and youth excel in school. In our budget planning approach, we are nearing the end of our first go-around cycle in preparation of the June preliminary budget. We are nearing the end of our initial draft release budget and now going into the amendment process, which I'll be outlining at the end of this presentation as well. In our timeline, we've now passed as I just said, the April preliminary budget release on April 25th, and we are currently in the feedback phase for the draft budget. And we are beginning preparation for all of the items that we're going to need to bring to the board this month and next month at the regular meeting to get some contracts in place for early approvals that we discussed back in March, and for items that will be coming up later on in June that we need to get contracts and hiring decisions in place for the 22-23 budget. Over the summer, we're going to be spending our time going through all of our assumptions in the June preliminary budget, making sure all rebalancing efforts are done in time for a meaningful discussion and vote at the end of October. In October, we're going to be finalizing our enrollment counts based on our third Friday, September information. We'll receive our final state numbers for equalization aid and our equalized property values, and we'll finalize all of our estimates and rebalance the budget where necessary. So for May's meeting today, we're going to go over some of the higher points of the budget book as an overview and some of our key revenue drivers. I do want to spend some time grounding the board and the public in the continued challenges of this state biennium budget, just so that we all understand what we are navigating in regards to what we've been able to enjoy in the past in our revenue limit, given our referendum authority and our local authority, and what is currently happening with the combination of declining enrollment and the second year of the state biennium budget. We'll also do a high-level overview of their excellence and equity projects, including our local investments and our ESSER project planning. And I provide the board a brief update on the property taxes, and especially what we expect to see in the June updates in the June preliminary vote. At the very end, as I said, we're going to go back and review the budget timeline and the amendment process. So this is a copy of the operating funds budget, appears on page 11 of the April preliminary budget book. What I'm trying to highlight here is where our major revenue and expenditure drivers are showing up in the budget that's been presented in April. I specifically highlight here the local resources inclusive of our tax levy. If you look down under state sources, it indicates that there's a reduction in state sources at the same time that the local sources are increasing. This is representative of the minimal changes we're experiencing in our revenue limit for next year, combined with an estimated 10% aid loss. As a reminder, in the revenue limit information we've been sharing with the board and the public over the last several months, our revenue limit is going up less than 1% over previous years. This is one of the lowest changes in our revenue limit we've seen in about 10 years. And it's made it specifically difficult to navigate as we're trying to get a balanced budget together for 22-23, inclusive of all of our priorities. You also will notice on here, there's a significant increase in federal resources. This should be no surprise, but this is specifically representative of the inclusion of our ESSER planning for 22-23 and the executive summary in the budget book that, of course, was presented in April. On the expenditure side, there's not a specific area to highlight in this grid, except that the fluctuations shown in this grid are tied to reallocation of our local resources and reinvestment of ESSER funding for 22-23. We had an $18 million plan go into the 21-22 budget for this year. And as we reinvest the money remaining from the ESSER 2 award from this year and a significant portion of our ESSER 3 award for 22-23, the fluctuations you're seeing in these categories under expenditures reflect where the priorities and where the excellence and equity projects are showing up as we code them in the state required WFR coding system. Next, I want to go briefly through a revenue outlook picture for 22-23 and beyond. As we're looking at the next three slides, I want to ground everyone in what the intent is, what we're about to see. I've highlighted the specific 4-year groupings of the last two operating referendums to show the difference in how the state and the local impact has been on what we approve locally in our operating referendum and what the state has given us in revenue limit authority. On the first slide, this one is something we've seen many times before. This is showing the historical 3-year membership average that we use in calculating our revenue limit and is also used in generating our state aid numbers each year. You'll see that for the first operating referendum back in the 16-17 school year, we had relatively flat but stable enrollment during those times. So every investment we were able to make in our operating referendum appeared as we expected during those 4-year periods. As we move forward to the 21-22 school year, when we approved our second operating referendum, this was, of course, the first year after COVID rocked the entire United States and the rest of the world, and we saw a significant decrease in our local enrollment. As these trends continue, not just on a one-year basis, but in the 3-year rolling average, which again is what's used in our revenue determinations, the impacts that are being shown in the next couple of slides become much more apparent. In our revenue forecast, again, this is a slide we've seen before. I've highlighted the same 2 operating referendum periods for illustration, showing that during the first operating referendum, we had investment from the state level over the course of those 4 years, where we were able to see an inflationary increase in the revenue limit or per pupil categorical aid compared to our local enrollment experience and our referendum authority that the electorate approved in 2016. Looking forward to the current 4-year period, in 2021, we see that we had a limited ability for us to increase the revenue limit or per pupil categorical aid during this period. And of course, the current biennium we find ourselves in for the 21-23 school fiscal year, biennial budget years, shows no increase at the state level. Finally, I do want to give an indication of what our future funding outlook looks in the revenue limit based on information we know right now. Everything in the lines shown on this graph show historical data with the exception of some extrapolation in the 23-24 school years and beyond. Again, I've highlighted the same 4-year period in the first half of this graph, showing the first operating referendum, where we had continuous investment from the state level on the per pupil categorical aid adjustment, as well as local investment in our operating referendum. In the second highlighted area here, we see that in the first year of this 4-year period, we saw our first downturn in enrollment, but we received what I had been signaling the board most of this year in regards to declining enrollment and hold harmless exemptions, lifting the authority of the revenue limit for Madison up 1 year. As we move forward to 22-23 and beyond, you see an immediate flattening of this line. This line indicates that with declining enrollment and hold harmless exemptions in play for our revenue limit, our ability to raise future revenues under the state funding formula is extremely hampered. And for future years, I provided 2 lines that continue. If we find ourselves in a situation beyond the 21-23 biennial budget years where we have another 0-0 in the state budget, the line indicated in blue on this chart, or the lower line, becomes a potential reality for us, showing that declining enrollment will forcibly contract the district's ability to raise revenue. Conversely, if we see a return to a typical, or what we would have used to call typical year, where we see $150 per pupil highlighted here, we see that the orange line continues to go up, but at a much smaller rate as we've seen in previous years. So before I move on, I do want to put a pause point in here to see if there's any questions or comments about this information.
Anyone?
Ross, as you and I presented the other day to the government officials of accounting, if you can go back to the one slide to really bring the point home in terms of one more future forecast, just to show everyone, Ross has presented this like 1,000 times, but I don't know if everyone's really catching this piece in terms of on this graph. Yes, when it went way down, that was during the time of Governor Walker, but then at the point we are right now, with the 0 and 0, the impact, if you look at where the line is across there, it's lower than when Governor Thompson was even in office. And this is having a profound impact because it's right in the middle of COVID and how we're trying to invest our dollars. I think even when we look at investing in staff, you invest in less and less, and we have to try to do more and more with less revenue coming in. The 0-0 really hit us kind of hard. So I just want to bring that piece out in terms of we're trying to work with our local dollars, even though we had the referendum, which Ross talked about, with the decline in enrollment too. Those pieces we're looking at not just for now, but in the future. That's the point he continues to make every time we present this. And I just wanted to point that out now.
Any other questions at this point? Okay, Ross, we can move forward.
Okay, as a brief review of what's in the April budget book that we presented last month, this is a high-level overview of the operating initiatives that we were able to accomplish in our workbook process for this year. While we do recognize a significant decrease in enrollment since the beginning of the pandemic, We've made every attempt not to reduce local resources or staff resources at the building level. And in doing so, we were able to reinvest many of the allocations into areas like full day 4K expansion. We're adding an additional 5 FTE for additional classroom sections across our 4K sites. Some additional targeted instructions and supports for library media staff, targeted Avid expansion at Weston Memorial High Schools, and 4.0 for targeted credit recovery at the high schools to address learning loss concerns following the pandemic. Additionally, to improve our student to staff ratios for some of our mental health supports at our building level, we added 9.4 social workers during our workbook process as an ongoing investment to ensure that our students have access to continued social work support. And planning for the future, as one of our budget reallocation efforts at central office, we've eliminated $1 million of cost at the central office level to increase our unallocated pool made available to our building staff. To our building supports to provide an additional 10 FTE teacher between now and the start of school for identified enrollment shifts or needs arising at the building level. Before we move on, I just want to highlight that almost everything we highlighted in our excellence and equity project planning for 22-23 is being done through use of our ESSER awards that we've been discussing over the last several months. This is due in large part due to the limited amount of revenue authority that we were granted under the revenue limit. So everything that's been represented in the ESSER executive summary in the appendix of the April budget book represents a surge strategy in staff and programming during the course of the ESSER awards. Understanding that after these funds are exhausted, that we may not have the ability to continue many of these programs or staff placements after September of 2024 when the grant funding ends. As a brief review, this is, sorry?
Go ahead.
As a brief review, the district has had the following awards from the federal government in direct response to ESSER. ESSER's 1, 2, and 3 are the largest of the awards here. We also had an award from the governor for the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, also referred to as GEAR. The first of these two awards, ESSER 1 and GEAR, were to be used up by September of 22. At this point, we've identified and allocated all of the costs and resources that have been attributed to these grants and have identified the cost and major categories in the ESSER executive summary in the back of the budget book. For ESSERs 2 and 3, we're reinvesting a lot of what was not spent this year on our ESSER 2 planning into our overall ESSER plan for next year, which is inclusive of the $39 million again presented in the ESSER plan in the budget book, as well as a great portion of ESSER 3 to make up the difference between the balance of ESSER 2 and going into the total of the $39 million. For ESSER planning, of course, one of the major tenets is that we stick to the 5 major areas of preparedness and how we respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's 5 major categories in grant guidance that we've been adhering to, which include preparedness and response for items like PPE, sanitation, and indoor air quality, outreach and services to special populations for additional services for ELLs, IEP needs, or to specifically address learning loss for those populations, educational technology, such as for devices, software, infrastructure, and or cybersecurity, for addressing long-term school closure, meaning additional staff needs for LTEs, food service coverage, and additional software needed to foster online learning or virtual options. And finally, mental health services and supports to help our students and staff who have been suffering quite a bit under the current pandemic. This is a high-level summary of the ESSER project planning in the back of the budget book. This is broken down by the same major categories on the last slide. This indicates here that we're currently planning approximately $8 million of our remaining ESSER 2 award and about 16.5 FTE on the same area. And for ESSER 3, an additional $31.9 million and 33 additional FTE between now and the end of those grant periods. I do want to indicate for those that are accessing this presentation online that there are links throughout this presentation linking back to the budget book and specifically the ESSER executive summary. Finally, one of the other areas I wanted to highlight here is in the April budget book, we had a modest assessment that equalized value and home value would be going up approximately 4%. As I very quickly learned, the city assessor's office published their report indicating where average home values are headed the day we hit print on the budget book for the April board meeting. So I do want to highlight that in the June budget book, we will be having an adjustment to this page, which is from the publication format in the appendix of the budget book, as well as the tax impact form also in the appendix of the budget book, indicating what is likely to happen under a 12.4% increase in home value as signaled by the city assessor's office. When we estimate equalized value each year and we estimate home value each year, we tend to take leads from the city assessor's report on what is likely to happen. Since the city of Madison represents about 90% of the district's municipality footprint, what happens in the city of Madison typically affects our entire equalization value. One thing I do want to highlight is that an increase in 12.4% on the home value does not automatically translate to an equalized value increase. Given the experience over the last year in regards to non-residential properties in the city of Madison, I think it's possible. Again, we're not going to get final numbers until August or September at this point, but I think it's possible that our equalized value increase could be closer to 10% instead of the 12.4%. If this comes to pass, I do want to highlight that the average homeowner impact could change and increase based on the inflationary increase of the home value instead of being in tandem with the equalized value increase. Just to clarify, if the equalized value went up the same rate as the average home value in this example, the average home impact of 8465 that is currently in the budget book would be exactly the same. It's when those two numbers deviate that the impact of the average home value can shift on us. One thing I do want to mention here too as well is that 4% increase in the April budget book represented a 20-cent reduction in the mill rate, which is shown on the slide here. If the equalized value and the average home value went up an average of 12% between now and what we published in the June budget book, the mill rate would drop by a full $1 instead. So with that, I think the last thing I have on this presentation is a review of the public input and board amendment process over the next couple of weeks. The feedback process is open now between the end of May on May 27th. Feedback is being collected through our Let's Talk platform at mmsd.org/budget. Board members are encouraged to address any amendments or questions to the administration so that we can get back information back to you in a timely manner. Any amendment requests from the board can be sent to my attention to identify and analyze any questions or comments regarding the draft preliminary budget. For next steps, between now and the end of May, we're going to continue to collect and incorporate any feedback on the draft preliminary budget. We'll update any information in anticipation of the June budget book preparation and vote at the end of June. We do want to hold the time between the board amendment process ending on May 27th and the week following to address any amendments potential on how we can include those into a June budget vote. In June, we'll preview any amendments that were submitted or any new feedback or information that was entered into the June budget. And we'll implement any agreed adjustments in preparation for the board vote at the end of the month on June 27th. And with that, if there's any questions or comments about anything tonight, please let me know.
Right, questions? Maybe I see your hand.
Yes, under the unallocated, it's on one of the slides, it said under unallocated, we had 10 positions in case of emergency. I believe.
That was a 10 additional 10 to the amount. The budget book right now currently states 23.7 unallocated in total. That 10 is inclusive of that amount.
And how much does that translate dollar-wise?
On average, if we're talking about how we currently address a teacher vacancy in the district, I can get you a number. Sorry, my computer's not cooperating.
They never do they?
No, just over $2 million in vacancies.
Thank you very much.
Did you have any?
That's all I have.
Okay. Holly?
Ross, can you kind of walk us through how much we have allocated for substitute teachers in this current iteration of the budget?
Best place I can point to in the budget book would be on the financial summaries. Best one I can get to quickly would be on page 59 of the budget book. On line 3 of that report, there's a line for sub-teacher contractual, which indicates the amount we hold for daily subs. The current budget for next year is at about $3.4 million for teacher daily subs.
Ross, can you talk about how much we spent this year on substitute teachers in comparison to that figure?
I can get you that information. I don't have that in front of me right now.
Ross, can you stop sharing?
Yes.
Thank you. Ross, can you talk us through a little bit of our overall benefits package for educators and what we're investing in insurance versus what we're asking our staff to contribute to their benefits package?
I can certainly start that off. We currently have a dual benefit structure for health insurance between Dean and GHC. At the time of Act 10, we had been pressured to move all of our staff employee premium contributions to 12%. We've been able to hold off on that amount for the last 10 years. At this point, we have a stratified employee premium contribution across all employee groups, mostly based on income level. The highest contributions are coming from the administration group. The lowest contribution levels are coming from some of our staff in the food service and security areas. The teachers fall right in the middle. I believe their current contribution percentage is 6%.
We're able to continue having teachers contribute about 6% into health insurance, despite the change in cost to health insurance, or are we kind of stable in what we're paying for health insurance? And if we are stable in what we're paying for health insurance, how long will we continue to experience that stability?
So right now we have an allowance of 3% on our premiums overall for the Dean and GHC programs based on negotiated rates that were put in place by the HR team last year. For the 23-24 school year, I believe we have a negotiated rate of a maximum of 3.5% rate between Dean and GHC. Given healthcare rates in the general market, I'd have no expectation that we're going to be below those guaranteed rates at this point. But at this point, 24, 25 and beyond, we would need to renegotiate on what our percentage increases could be and what our vendors are willing to bear going into future years with them.
Thank you so much. That's it for my questions.
Got it, Ross. Thank you. I just wanted to ask one question to confirm a figure and then wanted to make a comment. Do I read the budget book correctly that we have added 46 teacher positions?
If you're referring to the staff tables in the staffing summary area of the budget book, that is correct. One clarification I do want to put on that number is that some of the increases in our staffing tables this year are in direct relationship to our ESSER plan for next year. At the same time, there is additional teaching staff being identified in the special ed area that are showing up as teachers as opposed to SEAs. I'm currently working with Dr. Molfenter on additional SEA allocation that could be coming out of IDEA funding effective July 1st.
Got it. Thank you. That delineation will definitely be helpful to know. And just a suggestion for my board colleagues, I am interested in finding some amendment in a way to add more school psychs and more school counselors to this budget, just as a way to get that ratio even closer to these suggested ratios in terms of student to school psych ratios. I'm really proud of the work that y'all have done to get closer in terms of social workers to student ratios. I think that's a figure that we can all be more proud of. But that is one amendment that I'd be looking to explore in the coming weeks. So thank you.
Board Member Nichols.
Thank you. Ross, I'm not sure if you can answer this or not, but I would love to hear a little bit more. I'm in the ESSER planning part of the budget. There is a reference to an elementary cell curriculum on page 119. And then a couple of other cell curriculum screeners, developers on 121. And a school-based wellness center. So I don't know if anybody could speak to that a little bit, but I'm intrigued by that.
Sure. So SEL refers to social emotional learning. If Dr. Esser is available to speak to some of these items, I know that these were projects that her team put together for the coming year. You're muted, Leah.
Yeah, 2.5 years into the pandemic and I still can't unmute. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the question, Board Member Nichols. I appreciate it. I will try to do a quick high-level overview, but I did want to just respond to something that Savion had shared. Our ratios actually for social work remain the most problematic. They are the furthest away from the national recommendations. Our psych and counselor are considerably closer. Psych, I think we're off by 9 FTE. Social work, it's closer to 50. So I just wanted to share that as the board is considering those additions. Nichelle, your question was really, I think, about our overall strategy and approach to the social emotional and mental health work in ESSER. So I'll just do a really quick high level overview to contextualize that. So as this board knows, we really like to think about our work from a universal standpoint first, and then think about progressive intervention and increased supports from there. So we are prioritizing our school-based staff and getting additional staff in schools. Hence, thank you for the increase in social workers, for example. We're also really looking at those universal social emotional curricula. So this year we have 2 curriculum designers that are on ESSER, and their role has been to research social emotional curriculum at the elementary level. So that we can use, we'll have to issue a bid and all of that, but we'll use those funds then to purchase elementary cell materials, which we intend to pilot next year. We don't intend to do a full-scale implementation of our elementary cell curriculum because we are implementing multiple new things with our new curriculum adoption in particular. We are also then thinking about how we move up in grade levels. So also next year, really thinking about planning for middle and high school social emotional learning for implementation the subsequent year. Additionally, we begin to then also think about tier 2 interventions and tier 2 supports. So we are recommending those tier 2 curriculum designers as well, so that we can start thinking about small group interventions in a more systemic and thoughtful way. A couple other things I just want to note from a very, I'm just trying to think of the examples you pointed out, Nichelle, in particular. As we move up the triangle and we increase our levels of support, then we also have budget additions to expand our CBITS, which is our CBITS REST, which is our trauma-informed assessment and intervention. We also are looking to further expand bounce back at the elementary level to get in all schools and all of our alternative elementary programs. Also looking at continuing work around mental health navigation, and then of course, putting resources toward our most intensive programs, which would be behavioral health in schools at elementary and middle. And then we are also moving towards, Nichelle, a school-based, well, all board, a school-based wellness center concept at the high school. So next year, we have in this budget to add 4 therapists in each of the schools, and also wellness center planner and wellness center nurse practitioner planner, so that we can then secure potential grant funds and other things next year and work for full scale implementation in the year or 2 following.
Thank you for providing some of the detail on that. It's great to hear.
Other questions?
I'll hold for now.
Are there any other questions regarding the budget? Yeah, Board Member Simpkin.
I'm wondering about the Achieve 3000 and how that aligns with all of the other literacy components that are being added. And then along with that, has there been any research done to look at its effectiveness at this point?
So I would invite Kaylee to come up and discuss some of the assessment information in regards to Achieve 3000 if she's available.
Yes, certainly happy to. So, oh, and I see Ms. Cindy Green popping on as well. So Achieve 3000 is something that we have been using in the district for quite some time. What you'll actually notice is that Achieve 3000 is going to be utilized in grades 6, 7, 8, and 9 for next year. The reason that it's being used in grades 6, 7, and 8 is because we are not yet at a place where we have a core resource for humanities or literacy, which is something that we are going to be and are actually in the process of creating an RFP for that this next year. We're also using Achieve 3000 at the 9th grade level, which serves currently as our screener at all of those grade levels as well. So what it does is it provides both our teachers, our students, and our parents with Lexile information so that teachers are able to more accurately differentiate instruction. Have there been studies on its effectiveness? Absolutely. And we do have internal data on our students, their participation in it, our teachers' participation in it, as well as their Lexile growth for this year.
I would just add one additional component that Achieve 3000 when used at the middle school, the resources come in Spanish. And so our DLI classrooms have found a great benefit to utilize those resources as supplementary materials for either the humanities block or the Spanish language arts block.
Or does that, do you have another question?
Not right now.
Okay. Board member Nick.
Yes, thank you. All right. I have one more set of questions, and it's kind of combining some things together, so I'll try to make it as clear as I can. On page 7 in the budget book, we're highlighting student achievement summaries. And for goal 3, African American children and youth excel in school, I see that we have some data there for 2020-21, and it looks like it was based on the summer of 2021. At some point, it would be nice to know how many students were included in the achievement summary data, particularly since we were coming back and navigating through the pandemic. And I'm seeing that there are some positive gains over time. I'm wondering if we're making a connection to any of those gains, particularly in 2021, connected to some of the funding that we've had in ESSER or around particular curriculum and instruction moves. And so it'd be nice to hear if we think there's some contribution or correlation with the gains with any investments we've made. And then the second part, and maybe it's connected or not, we have on page 20 in the budget book, under engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it says that the district currently funds $450,000 in Black excellence programming. And then there are some additional funds available under coronavirus relief funds. Is the 450,000 included in that 940, or is that still separate from the additional coronavirus relief funds? Sorry if I jumbled both of those questions.
That's fine. So I can answer the second one with certainty. If there's anyone else who could speak to the report from the R&I team in regards to Black excellence, to African American student performance information, I'll put them on deck if they're available. But the $450,000 on page 20 is separate from the investments that are bulleted below. So the $450,000 is our legacy investment in Black excellence programming between Fund 10 and 80, as we've done in years past. The coronavirus relief funds through Carolyn Stanford Taylor's department is going to be utilizing the two amounts in the bulleted list below for additional programming for 22-23.
Okay, thank you very much, Ross. And do you know, is there a way to see more around the planning of those funds under engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion?
I can certainly reach out to Carolyn's team about information about where they are with that planning.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like a great opportunity and unique investment, so I'd love to hear more. And the goal 3 information, if nobody's on deck tonight, is fine. We can come back to that at a later point.
Great, thank you.
Michelle, that was awesome, and you beat me to my question, so thank you.
Yes. Okay, so my next set of questions refers to page 23 and the 2 paragraphs about Madison Promise. And I'm wondering if there's
I'm sorry,
somebody,
Board Member Sinkin, what page?
23,
Thank you.
with Madison Promise.
Mhm.
And what I see is that there's a plan for a significant expansion of this youth program. And I'm wondering if there's anybody on the line who could talk about what this would look like for next year, and then what is anticipated after that.
I don't know if Dr. McCray is here to speak specifically on that, but I know based on the discussions we had in March, when we put this item up for early approval, we did have a longer discussion regarding the future of Madison Promise and how it was being treated as a virtual option, not its own school program. Dr. Jenkins, I don't know if there's a specific call out to that program that you could speak to at this point.
Yeah, most definitely. One of the things that we've done, and I think that's a great question that you're asking too, we have moved from virtual learning to online learning. Dr. McCray has looked at a design where students are going to become the owners of their learning. The student agency is what it's going to be more about. And so we're looking to expand that. And some of our students we did realize during the pandemic have thrived in that environment. And online learning is not something new. Actually, it was taken up before the pandemic. When we went into the pandemic, we went virtual learning, which was pretty much crisis almost kind of learning. We have learned a lot from that, the way we're looking to go. Dr. McCray and his expertise in that area led us to know that we want to continue to have this viable option for our students.
Thank you. And since we're focusing our discussion on the budget, I'm wondering, has there been any analysis on the cost per student of offering a virtual learning option or an online learning option versus an in-person option?
We did look between the two, and as Ross was beginning to explain, it's not like a separate school in terms of what we're looking at. And we did talk about anytime you do something, you get different options. There's a cause and effect that could be the benefits in which we see in giving our students a different option here, they outweigh it. But we can come back with the numbers so that you can see it exactly why we chose to expand this particular option.
Yeah, and I guess just to clarify, what I'm wondering about, I recognize that there's significant learning benefits for some students to be in this type of an environment. And I'm just wondering about the, I guess the difference in actual expense for implementation of this type of program, whether it's more or less expensive than having a student housed in a school environment.
Great question. We'll get back with you. And if I, while I'm speaking to Board Member Nichols, you asked a question earlier about grade 3. Could you repeat the question? I want to make sure we record it.
Yes, I believe my question was twofold. One, the number of students included in the data points that we see listed for goal 3. And secondly, if there was any analysis or just thinking around what may have caused the gains, particularly in some of the lines between 2019 and 20 and 2021. I know that there have been a lot of efforts over the last year or two in the district around an emphasis on literacy as well as a suite of assessments. And so I'm just curious what contributions or correlations curriculum and instruction might feel could have contributed to those gains.
Right, most definitely. Well, we have the questions, and we'll come back to that for all the board.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in with a few questions. One of the things that I took a look at in comparing, the budget book from this year to last year, I'm just looking at some of the information that was available in the appendices. And one of the things that I find highly valuable is the equity staffing charts that tell us at the school level how all of the staffing is allocated in the different categories. And tells us, all the characteristics of the different schools and the enrollment numbers and the all of that information sort of in one snapshot. And so I'm wondering if we can get that provided to the board going forward. And then also just knowing that there is some, over the past 2 years, there's been some volatility in some of our funds, such as the food service fund and the community service fund. There were narrative reports that were in the appendices for those as well. And I'm wondering if we can get updates on that so we can continue to sort of understand in a narrative wise how those are tracking. So when we start talking about planning for the future, what we need to look at for making sure that those stay fully funded.
Great. So just to comment on that real quick, the equity staffing charts that have been in the budget book in the past, those reports still exist. I'm currently trying to make sure that those get out to board members in the next available weekly update. The only reason I elected to remove those from the appendices is not to hide them, but that every year when we create those items, they have almost no relationship to the budget we're creating. So the equity staffing charts we created this year were for the 21-22 school year. I physically can't create an equity chart model for the 22-23 school year this early because I won't know the exact demographic makeup of the student population in those charts until after third Friday, which is when I do the data poll. But to make sure that that gets in the board's hands, I will work with our senior leadership to make sure that those get out as soon as possible. As far as the volatility referenced in the food service and community services fund, I'm happy to continue that dialogue. The reason those reports are not in the appendices is because they were largely duplicative of the department summaries that contained a lot of the same information. But if there's a different format that we can use to incorporate some of the information you're looking for into those department summaries, I'm happy to entertain that as we refine this going forward.
Okay, that would be really helpful. And thinking about those equity staffing charts, just like what the point in time will be so that they are accurate for the current budget. If that has to wait till fall, would we be able to get the ones that are, again, the year behind, the ones that would normally have been in the table and included, and then going forward, do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem putting them back in. I just, I'd want to make sure I understand what the intent would be to put an old report in the perspective book. And could I get them in place by the time we do the fall budget book? That would be tight because I'd be using information that is still wet to make sure that that's available in time for the printing of the budget book. But if it's something we even add after approval so that it's in a legacy version of the budget book, we could have that discussion.
Yeah, and maybe the budget book isn't the place where it lives. Maybe it lives somewhere else where
perhaps
you can see it. I don't know where that is, but it does make sense to have it up to date and current. If it's a year behind, it doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening allocation wise in the schools. So we can have a discussion maybe on that at a later date, trying to figure out what the point in time that would be most.
So as a suggestion, I'd be happy to work with the R&I team about incorporating the equity staffing chart into their enrollment summary document, perhaps as a future placement for that report. Otherwise, we can try and figure out what the best place for that is over the next couple of months. Happy to do that.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you so much. And then I have a question about the department summaries. One of the things I was having a hard time was figuring out how our shifts in central office have sort of moved around our staffing plans a little bit, or specifically trying to figure out what had happened with staffing for our English language learner department or our Office of Multilingual and Global Education. It seems like it got split into a couple pieces, and part's still in instruction and part is in state and federal programs. And then it seems like there was a chunk taken out of teaching and learning, advanced learning went in with special education. And it's really hard to tell if any of those staffing levels moved. So I guess I don't know if there's an easy way to summarize how things have moved around and shifted. And you know, I understand that's based on calculations of what is best for the functioning of the district, but I think it would be great if there was some way that we could understand, yeah, how that's working.
Yeah.
Sure. So I'm sorry.
Okay, Ross, you had it.
Okay. From a comparative standpoint, let me make sure I get all these in order, Chris, and stop me if I miss something. You are correct that the original Office of Multilingual and Global Education was split into two areas. One aspect, the compliance piece, went into state and federal programs, which is why the staffing table on page 143 does reflect some of our BRSs and our BRTs at our school level. The C&I component has a lot to do with our curriculum writing and some of our teacher coaches. But there has not been there has not been any decrease in that staffing level. It's just where they are currently housed in these department summaries. I will concede that it is somewhat difficult to compare one year to the next. One of the issues I have to navigate when I'm putting these department summaries together each year is that year over year comparison can become difficult if the structure of a department gets split like this. In regards to advanced learning, there has been no reduction in advanced learning personnel, but they were at the beginning of the current school year incorporated in the C&I team. And you are correct, next year they are incorporated with the student services team. Did I miss any of the categories you were talking about?
And then it was just hard to tell what was happening with special education because the advanced learning had gotten absorbed into that. And it seemed like there might have been some movement in there with SEA numbers and things like that, but it was hard for me to tell.
So just to speak briefly to that, you are correct that student services and advanced learning are now combined. The only difference in the staffing, first of all, overall special education staffing has not changed. We are having continued allocation discussions in regards to IDEA funding for 22-23. But the only, if I were to do attempt to do a direct comparison of these two areas, there would be an initial starting increase in CC teachers versus SEA. But again, we're having continuing discussions about SEA allocation out of federal dollars for next year with Dr. Molfenter.
Okay, so that's something that can come to us in the future.
You'll see that in future budget books as amounts get populated over the summer.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Jenkins?
Well, Ross did an excellent job explaining it, and I know Ms. Green had jumped on too, that she had something to add to it. And also your previous question about the Madison Fund, Dr. McCray is here to respond to it. Ms. Green, did you have anything to add?
No, I think Ross did an amazing job of explaining as we were doing reorganization. And I would say that we are continuing to reflect and see where we need to make adjustments to continuously serve our students. So that is part of the process that we're going through right now. And if there's any additional changes, we'll just make sure that those are provided to the board as well. But Ross knows the ed side of the house as well as he knows the ops side of the house.
Dr. McCray is here for an earlier question about Madison Promise. He can expand on what I had stated.
Hey, Dr. McCray, are you here with us?
I am, if you want to repeat the question here. Oh, some reason it's not showing my face, but I'm here. Let me fix that.
It's the technology.
You have the nice Madison.
There you go.
There you are.
There you go.
All right, Laura, did you want to repeat your question?
I would love to. I am wondering for Madison Promise, what is, it looking like it's going to shape up to be next year, and then what is your plan or your vision, for the next few years after that?
Yes, so currently for next year, our plan is to enroll students in grade 4 through 10. The following year, so for 22-23, that'll be grades 4 through 10, 23-24, 4 through 11, and the year after that become 4 through 12. So the goal is to each year add that next grade level until we reach that 4th through 12th grade grade span.
How many students are you looking at enrolling?
Yep. So what we are targeting is for 200 fourth and fifth grade students. This is next year, 150 6 through 12 for next year. So that's a total of 350 students for next year. And then the year following, staying fast at that 200 for fourth through fifth grade. Our goal is to keep that number because what's driving this is the staffing. And so the elementary numbers will always remain the same at 200. And then each year when we add a grade level, so next year we're doing 150, then we'll increase to 175 and eventually get to 200 for the 6th through 12th grade. And again, what's driving those numbers is the staffing component.
What are you looking at for staff to student ratio?
So right now what and it's kind of hard. So let me explain the staffing, how it works. I think that might be easier. So right now what we have is when we think about our core teachers, we have 4. I have, let's just think about the 6th through 12th grade, and then we can come back and look at the elementary because they're going to be staffed a little bit different because of just the needs. So that's kind of the very thing to keep in mind. It's almost like it's almost 2 schools in one because the schedules are going to be different at the elementary level versus what the schedules are going to look like at the secondary level. So for secondary, we have 4 core teachers that we are using that are full-time with Madison Promise that are serving all of those students. And then what we've been able to do is with our additional allocations, be able to offer some of our teachers in the buildings overload for our electives. Now for next year, we are very fortunate. We've learned a lot this year. And so what we're going to be able to do is have more dedicated staff. So for example, we're going to have a full-time PE teacher this year, where last year we had to have 2 PE teachers in order to cover the student needs because we were building off of the allocations of like this teacher can do an overage here, this teacher can do an overage here. We're going to be doing the same thing for our business teacher, having a teacher who's going to be dedicated to our program next year. We'll be able to offer our CTE program courses all the way from middle school because we have a couple of business courses that we offer in middle school all the way through up to high school. We're using a Spanish teacher that's part allocation in one of our buildings, and her other allocation will be with us for next year to cover our Spanish. At the elementary level, we're thinking for each grade level, we're going to have 3 core teachers. So those teachers, we have 3 for 4th grade, 3 for 5th grade. And then what we are most excited about is we're actually going to have a teacher for music as well as art for our elementary students as well. We will have an elementary teacher to support with PE, but that's going to be a little bit different. But for the music and art, they will have an actual teacher that will be dedicated to them where they can get live instruction in music and art coming for next year.
And so for students who have IEPs or who are advanced learners, how will this program work for them?
Great question. This year, next year coming up, we're excited. I hope you've been able to visit our website and see some of the changes that we put out there. We will be supporting our AL learners. We were not able to support them last year just because we were learning. And so this year we are advertising, supporting. We've reached out to our AL department. We understood like how we need to support these students. And so we'll be able to offer that support directly in the math, the way we do in the buildings. We're also going to be offering AP courses next year. 2 of our teachers are going to get certified for AP to teach next year. The following year, we'll be adding more AP classes. As we are adding the grade levels, we will begin to offer and add those courses. Our student service department has stepped up for us this year. They provide us with 2 CC teachers to support our students with IEPs. Those CC teachers are back with us for next year. So we are excited to continue to be able to support them at the same way. Nancy and her team has really helped us to work individually with the students, supporting them, providing them with any help and assistance that they need.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. McRae.
Anytime.
And I see Gordon has joined us on the screen. Gordon, are there any questions that you have or comments regarding the budget?
No, when he did, I think it was Ms. McPherson, when he did presented. I mean, it looked as pretty much the same as it did last time. I didn't have any questions or concerns regarding that. I just want to make sure that we are doing things to be, cost efficient and that we are trying our best to forecast for future costs. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gordon. All right, any other budget questions? Yeah, Laura, a couple more and then we'll move on. Okay, yes.
Okay, I'm wondering on page 59, line 26 for security. I see a decrease and I'm wondering where that decrease is actually going to play out within a school.
So thank you for that. I believe I got this question earlier today as well. There's no decrease in the FTE for security assistance in this year's budget. What you're seeing here is either the result of a turnover adjustment for existing staff or a replacement of an existing staff member with a vacancy rate for next year. So this would not translate to any coverage at the building level for security assistance.
Okay, so I'm going to repeat that back to see if I understand what you said.
Sure.
So what you're saying is that it's a replacement and so a newer staff person is coming in at an entry rate of pay, and that's the difference, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Dr. Jenkins, did you have a comment? Your hand is still up. Is that from before? Okay.
No.
All right, Board Member Nichols.
Okay, thank you. So Ross, what I'm wondering about is, as we're managing the ESSER funds, each with their own horizon or deadline to use the funds, what is your process in monitoring that kind of all of the plans, all of the FTE, some of the, great ideas are actually, being implemented, and what happens when there's, I guess, carryover ESSER funds? Do they get reallocated to other projects? Or, if you could just talk a little bit about the process of how we're managing all of the funds.
Sure. So one of the major investments we made in our plan for the remainder of the ESSER awards, and something we had that went through early approvals in March, was the implementation of an ESSER project manager that would do exactly what you're describing. This person will be reporting to the state and federal team, conjunction with Jennifer Waldner, as well as our grants accountant support in my department, to make sure that we're following the letter of the grant guidelines from now until the end of September 2024. But if we do have situations at the end of 22-23 where amounts that we plan for did not get spent, that will get incorporated into any and all planning we do for the 23-24 budget to ensure that we have every dollar spent between now and the end of the grant period deadline.
Okay, great, thank you. And my last follow-up is, I know you've said this, Ross, a couple of times, that all of the expansions and some of the amazing investments that are being funded by ESSER, that will sunset when the funds come to an end, right?
That's correct.
But what I'm seeing in some cases is that we're actually expanding what looks like could be core programming for the district. For instance, we just talked with Dr. McCray about Promise Academy, right? That's ESSER funded right now. And yet we may find a couple years in that is a great way for students to learn, and that we want to maintain it. And I guess I'm just wondering, have we thought about a process a year or two out, what that's going to look like, about how we decide which of these programs we may want to keep versus letting them all just sunset?
Thank you for that question. One of the benefits of the way the ESSER awards are given to the district right now is we're able to put some new things into effect that we may find, as you say, to be very effective for our staff and our students 2 years out. That being said, we've been very cognizant to say upfront that everything we're doing on here represents a surge strategy, because I know and we know that the money we have is temporary. So we can't rely that these programs will automatically continue in the investments we're making now. We can't do that. In order for us to even entertain that, we would need to have a lot more information that we don't have right now about the next biennial budget process. And to be perfectly honest, the level of investment we would need to maintain even half of what we're currently planning to do next year would represent an increase in our revenue limit authority like the state has never seen. So we may find ourselves in a situation where we do want to figure out what the future of Madison Promise looks like that may incorporate a portion of what we're investing now. But at this point, we're unable to promise that anything that we're doing will be available to continue on local dollars at the sunset of these grants.
Nikki, I saw your hand.
Yes.
Do you have a clarification? And
Yeah,
then-
yeah, a clarification regarding it. I believe in March or April, we vote to increase the 10 FTE for Madison Promise, so that it would include after the pandemic?
No, we did not. We only approved it on the ESSER plan.
Okay, that's where I got confused.
All right, thank you. And then Ross, can you just wrap us up with one final thing about community engagement? If people want to give us feedback on the budget, how do they go about doing that?
Right. So the website at mmsd.org/budget will take you to the budget planning and accounting homepage. There's a link to our Let's Talk platform from that webpage that'll give you direct ability to provide feedback about any aspect of the budget book or the budget process. Those will come to my attention via the communications team. And we will certainly summarize all that feedback in a future board meeting, most likely the June operations work group. And I'll just restate, since you gave me the opportunity, that if board members do have any additional questions or concerns regarding anything we didn't get to discuss tonight, to please bring that to my attention, and I'll work with Dr. McGregory on coordinating those responses as soon as I can. Similarly, I do want to make sure that any amendments the board want me to cost out or consider get to me before the April or the May 27th guide deadline, so that I can be sure to get the June budget book production schedule on track.
Okay, thank you so much for all the work that has gone into getting us to this point, Ross, and for all the work that your team is continuing to do on that. It is much appreciated. We will move on to the next agenda item, which is a presentation of the referendum or an update on that. And I believe we have Mr. Hodo here to start us out.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you, Board Member Gomez Schmidt. Barb, if you don't mind, would you mind driving the slides? And if not, I'll also ask Alyssa to be prepared to drive the slides. While the slides are preparing, my team is also on here, and I'll take a brief moment to go over members of my team. We're extremely excited to the community. If the slide presentation can start.
Just a second, working on it.
Got it. I think I see every member of my team as well. All right, thank you, Barb. Well, first of all, good evening to the members of the Board of Education, Superintendent Dr. Jenkins, MMSD colleagues, community, and friends of Madison.
Oh,
Wrong page. I'm so sorry.
Mr. Hodo, hold on one second.
Okay.
And this is Jesse, who we have helping us out tonight.
Sure, no problem.
Thank you. Sorry.
And I think we have Alyssa on standby to share her screen if worst case scenario. Yep, there we go.
Better?
All right, Jesse, I think you may have your screen, the little blot is in the middle. You may have to move over your, in your, you see, you may can't see it on your screen. No, go back to the first page. I think your panel screen is showing.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. All right, thanks, Alyssa. Appreciate it. Again, first of all, good evening to the members of the Board of Education, Superintendent Dr. Jenkins, MMSD colleague, community, and friends of Madison. We are extremely excited to present this to you tonight. We've been working over 2 years driving the referendum. We want to give our community an update. If you go to the next slide, as always, we always anchor everything we do in our goals. Goal number one, every child is on track to graduate ready for college, career, and community. Goal two, the district and every school in it is a place where children, staff, and families thrive. And of course, goal number three, African-American children and youth excel in school. Next slide. Tonight's presentation is a team effort. You'll get opportunity to see members of our building service staff, those who are in the trenches on a daily basis, making sure that the referendum in the schools are taken care of. You'll also hear from our referendum, from our consultants from Findorf, Aaron Zutz, EUA, Jackie Michaels, and Huffman, all consultants on this project. EUA, of course, is our architect, Findorf is our project managers, and Huffman is our owner's rep who will be supporting us. We'll transition over after some in-depth financial updates around the referendum and updates. We'll transition over to playgrounds and beautifications. We think you really will enjoy some of the things that the building services team is doing. Always, we want to hear from our scholars. We have a very important message. Board Member Gomez-Schmidt, we got the video this past weekend, but I thought it was an opportunity for us to hear and anchor everything we do by listening to our scholars. They have a message for our board members. And then finally, we'll transition over to our building services summer projects and the heavy lifting that our facilities and maintenance team is taking on for this summer. Next slide. Just giving an opportunity to introduce myself for some of the board members who may or may not know me. Cedric Hodo, Chief Operations Officer, Executive Director of Building and Auxiliary Services, overseeing basically 5 departments: facilities and maintenance, buildings and ground, referendum, and transportation, food and nutrition. Thank you. Next slide. I want to take the opportunity to highlight this amazing team that supports me in taking care of all of those departments. We're led by our champion, Dean Kuntz, our interim assistant director, Angela Moss, building and grounds manager, Darren Green, buildings and grounds manager, Nick Guerra, buildings and grounds manager, and Dan Ringo, our project manager, making sure that our floor care, our classroom is sanitized, making sure our PPEs and COVID equipment is there, as well as taking care of our internal and external building and our fleet. Next slide. This is the heavyweight team here. This team here is the one who is responsible for overseeing your referendum. I'm going to take a moment to highlight some of the hard work that they've done. Svetlin Borsov, he's overseeing transition from Brandon Halverson. Mike McDonald is our facilities manager and mechanical engineer, overseeing all of our mechanical upgrades, plumbing, electrician. Corey DeGroff, he's our facilities manager who also supports our electricity. He's also electrical engineer as well. Anthony Grimm, who's our environmental and program manager, does a fantastic job with all of our remediations that goes on and all environmental work inside the school. And of course, Alyssa Brown, who's supporting us as an architectural assistant, as well as project managers, making sure that everything stays on track. And of course, Chad Warrow, who will support us with ensuring that the 6 referendum sites and everything that we've asked our consultants to take care of. Chad will be grounds, boots on the grounds, making sure that we have an eye on all of our projects. Next slide. I'll transition over to our consultants here, Jackie Michaels, who will take us into the next phase of a design recap and share with us the hard work that has been in the architectural aspect of this program. Jackie.
Good evening, school board. I'm Jackie Michaels, as Cedric had relayed, with EUA, project manager. And I just wanted to take a pause here and truly celebrate the moment of where we're at in this entire referendum process. We have wrapped up the design for the 6 projects, and we're in the process right now of finalizing the permits with the city to really get moving now, get boots on the ground, and start digging holes and making a mess of all of our schools so that we can put them back together and make them into amazing spaces. The 4 images that you see here on the screen are of the 4 comprehensive high schools. The upper left is La Follette. This is one of their new corridors where we're really utilizing the dark kind of openings there as wayfinding and gateways into the A and B wing of that school. The upper right is of the reception desk at the new Welcome Center at Memorial High School. And here we're trying to showcase some of the interior finishes that will be utilized at the desk. The bottom left is a view at East High School of the mall, looking towards the forum and the new grab and go area for the students and staff. And the bottom right is a view from the pool deck towards the spectator seating for that exciting new west edition of the new natatorium space. Go to the next slide, Alyssa. We also wanted to highlight the two other projects. The upper left is Capitol High School. This is where the new cafeteria commons space is. So this is a great opportunity for student and staff collaboration and learning. The bottom left is an exterior view of the Southside Elementary project. And you can see kind of the tan box with the glazing. That is, I'm highlighting the LMC space, which is often the heart of an elementary school for collaboration and learning. We also wanted to utilize and share some of the site improvements that we're doing. So the bottom right is a view at West High School, where we're replacing an existing retaining wall with some additional landscaping and fencing. And you can see in the background there's the new athletic turf field. And the upper right is kind of it's the plan of the La Follette turf field where the Lancers and Perk holders will be sharing field. So we're working through the finalized details of all the striping and the logos and such for that. But all of this was done in collaboration with the district administration, the school administration, and staff. We did a quick count. There were over 200 meetings where we met with district and staff to talk through the design details. We also met with the district administration approximately 60 times just to go through some of those finite details, make sure we had equity across the projects, and to talk through any concerns that anyone had. So we sincerely thank everyone for all of the time and effort that they put forth so far into this phase. And we certainly are looking forward to the next phase to see that these renderings certainly come to life.
Thanks, Jackie. Again, my name is Aaron Zutz with Findorf. I'm a senior project manager, and been excited to be part of the process with EUA in the district as the design process has progressed to the point where we're now able to start construction, and we're really excited about that. As many people have probably seen driving around town, construction has already started at some of the sites. So I'm going to highlight the sites that construction started at, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what the progression of the schedule will be. So the first school that I wanted to show here is La Follette. Some of the most noticeable work has been at Lucier Stadium, where the east bleachers have been removed in preparation for summer work, where the turf field will be redone and the track. So we're excited to have that down and really gearing up to start on that work and in the school during the summer. Next slide, please. At West, many people have probably seen that the field is torn up. We are mobilizing on site. The construction trailers are there. For a couple weeks, folks probably saw the rock crusher out there. As part of our goals to recycle and reuse as much as possible, that crusher was there to recycle some aggregate to be repurposed as part of this project. Additionally, for those inside the school, off to the right here, you're starting to see some temporary partitions. So as we work through the schools and we have construction in close proximity to the students, safety is of the utmost importance. So this is a good example of that separation that we want to have between construction and the students to provide that safe barrier. Next slide, please. And then East is the third school, but probably the least noticeable. What you're seeing here is some of the work that's occurred second shift in the basements and the tunnels. So after students have left for the day, workers have been down crawling around on their hands and knees, installing pipe and conduit in preparation for work this summer so that we can really get going when the schools are vacated for the summer. There are a couple schools that work hasn't started yet. And if we transition to the next slide where we look at the schedule, we have mobilization at Memorial here coming up in the next couple weeks. We'll start to see construction trailers there. And then after school gets out, we'll have construction starting at Southside. So right now, off to the left side of the bar chart, we're in the orange there. We're kind of doing this light work that we've talked about and really gearing up for this summer start. We'll be doing significant work at all 4 high schools as well as the Southside Elementary School renovations. We're very excited about that. As we start to kind of progress through, we've talked a little bit about schedule, and we want to talk a little bit about budget and finances. And we can't start off that discussion without talking a little bit about the current market that we're in right now. And that market is one of historic inflation. This is just a very brief graph where you can see that over the last 10 years, inflation has been at about 3.5%. Last year for construction, it was about 9%. There are some construction indices, material-based, that were as high as 18%. But even the 9% average that we've seen through multiple indices is higher than the consumer price index by about 2%, with the CPI being about 2% in 2021. And this chart doesn't reflect the inflation we've seen here in the first quarter and second quarter of 2022 already, which is significant as well.
Great, thanks, Aaron. My name is Jordan Schultz, and I'm part of the owner project management team, Huffman Facilities Development. So this slide shows a bit on how the referendum project compares to market conditions. So at the bottom in blue, you'll see, like Aaron commented, historical inflation averages just over 3%. And more recently, annual inflation has been significantly more than that. We've all been to the grocery or to the gas pump and seen vegetables and fruits or gas at the pump being significantly more expensive than it would have been a year ago. And that is no less true, of course, in construction, like Aaron said. And while inflation has certainly been hard at work, our project team as a whole has been at even harder work. So I'm going to describe a couple reasons the green line, which is the referendum project in the last couple of years, is a slightly different trajectory than the current market. Number one, you see the initial uptick on the project being due to certainly inflation, also some added value, added scope. But then it transitioned and has transitioned and inflected at a point due to two primary factors, one of which is significant cost controls. The design team, the construction team, the ownership team have all worked together to ensure that we are providing the best design at the best cost for this project. And then secondly, the point that Jackie made earlier, as well as Aaron, is that the project has been bid out and all 6 schools have been contracted, thus isolating us and insulating us from further exposure to future inflation. We're going to talk a little bit more in detail and I'll transition to Mike from our team.
Thanks, Jordan. Well, I'm Mike Huffman with Huffman Facility Development. We've been on the project since April 1st. We've been through a crash course in learning where you've been and trying to understand where you're headed. So I want to give you a summary, really, of your current financial position in consideration of these last 2 slides. But first, I want to emphasize what Jordan touched on. Although we're just at the beginning of the construction phase, and it might seem like we're halfway through the referendum process, finishing design and now starting in construction, we think of the budget in terms of risk that's out there. And you have hit a very, very significant milestone in terms of putting some of that risk behind you. So as Aaron mentioned, a lot of the bidding has occurred. Fendorf has bid out about 95% of the work that they need to accomplish. And of course, you're on the project soft side. A lot of that cost is also behind you. So you're much advanced in the project in terms of risk. But now what has been realized from that risk and from in consideration to the 2 previous slides? So what has come before you and what is currently approved costs is you've experienced about $11 million in inflation. So you experienced that through the bidding process, and the GMP contracts that you have authorized represent that $11 million of inflation that's been realized. You've also experienced some extra benefit to the to the school district by way of some added scope. So along the way, there were some mechanical and electrical additional scope items that added value to the project. That value came with a cost, and that cost is at approximately 9 million. And then finally, you've also experienced some bids outside of Findorf's purview. So there are some owner direct costs within the construction field. And primarily that relates to environmental hazards and removal of those environmental hazards. And those bids have shown approximately $8 million in additional risk that's been incurred. So that leaves you in a current financial position where you're sitting at $28 million of additional approved cost at this point. Now, I think Ross and others could tell you about how that the funding has been identified for that. It's essentially Fund 10. I won't get any further into that until you have questions. But that tells you where you sit at current state with approved costs. Now we look forward and we have to project, look into our crystal ball, so to speak, and say, well, what is the risk that's out ahead of us? And we really see that risk as two things. So the one piece of current market that's left is that we have supply chain issues. Your projects are not as subject to supply chain issues as another project that is just building up straight from the ground. A lot of the structural and exterior building envelope materials have supply chain issues in the current market. Yours is largely renovation. There will be items that have supply chain problems, definitely petroleum-based materials. But really the biggest risk out in front of you is that we have 6 campuses of existing buildings, and some of them quite older. And it's in any renovation, it is a process of discovery. When you get into the bones of a building, get into the mechanical systems of a building, what do you discover that wasn't known? And that really is where we identify the greatest risk moving forward with the project.
Next slide. All right, thank you, Mike and team. And so board members, when the rubber meets the road, here's a quick snapshot. You'll get a chance to see each specific school and where we're landing at based upon what we can see. The first column you'll see is the revised budget for the referendum for each school. The second column you'll see is the overage, or anything that of which is over and above the original budget. And you'll see this total compilation down at the bottom, that 28.3 million is what Mike is referring to. You'll see the total amount in the budget where we're standing at 345 when you put everything together. And then 2 columns to the right, you can see what we've actually spent thus far at each school, all the way to the far right. And the open POs is the amount that we've requested, but simply we have not spent the money yet. And so this is where we land financially. Board Member Gomez-Smith, if you want me to pause here before we continue on, in the event that you or anyone may have any questions, we'll be more than welcome to route that question to the appropriate staff member.
Sure, thank you. Does anybody have any questions thus far in the presentation?
Question.
Okay, Board Member Nichols?
Thank you. Are the overages that you're talking about in the current budget book? And Mr. Hodo, that may not be for you. This may be a Ross question if he's still on.
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay.
At this point, no, they are not in the budget book. One of the things that we discussed with the board earlier this year is that I've been working with Cedric's team for the better part of this year to help keep track and identify where the referendum was headed. And some of the ideas surrounding the mechanical and electrical and the environmental costs associated with our 4 comprehensive high schools were starting to show signs of stress. So I believe it was in February, although don't quote me on that, I identified that we know we have a second payment from our TID 25 closure that is due to us next fiscal year of $7 million. And I'm recommending to the board, and I recommended to the board at that time, and I'm continuing to recommend that we hold the entirety of that award to address the beginning of these overage costs as we see them. I will share with the board at this point that there is a second TID closure that is on our radar that we're watching for the 23-24 school year. I believe it is TID 6. That we also expect a significant closure of several $1 million that we would be identifying for overages in this area. The majority of what's left here is something that I'm going to be working very closely with Cedric's team over the next 3 years to either identify as something to come out of his regular maintenance budget in Fund 10 and Fund 41 if possible. Additionally, if we continue to see inflationary costs affecting the referendum in this way, we could do other things, including up to re-examining the current investment for HVAC on ESSER 3 that we have in the ESSER executive summary right now. Through combination of many of those efforts, it's possible we could get this under control with resources we already know about, but there is no hiding the fact that construction inflation has certainly affected our referendum like it is affecting the entire country right now.
And then just a real quick follow-up. So you're saying that the 28 million is over 3 years?
Between now and the end of the referendum itself. I mean, the first major construction period is this summer. So by the time we get to the end, yeah, it'll be, I'm saying over 3 fiscal years, it's most likely to show itself.
All right, thank you.
Gordon, I see your hand up.
Yes, I just have a very simple question. What does Openpo mean again?
PO refers to a purchase order indicating we've already approved and designated funding in an existing budgetary line for a specific purpose. So when we go through consent items at the board level, especially those over $35,000, we create a purchase order that holds money in a budgetary account to be used for that purpose. That amount stays open until we have work completed or delivery of a good or service, in which case that purchase order liquidates and becomes an actual expenditure in the budget.
All right, thank you.
Just,
yeah, board member Vandermeulen.
I understand of supply chain. I understand of overages and I get that inflation and prices go up. What I can't understand is why we have decided to pay off debts in advance, yet we can't pay and retract our teachers for the same 7 million. It doesn't make sense. And it's the exact same amount. So why are we doing one and not the other? Which do we hold more important? Paying the debt that we owe or paying the people to teach? That's the end of my comments.
Can you clarify that for me again? Like what the
Not without getting buzzed, because it's to provide what I can't say. To provide
No. I'm talking about the actual dollar amount that you're
The
talking
7
about
million.
based on what was in the presentation.
7 million,
Okay, from,
which is how much the debt is. Is the cost of $7 million, and that is the cost of the other as well.
okay, I'm again, not sure where I'm seeing, I don't know, Ross, where the 7 million?
So 7 million is referring to the TID closure,
TID closure,
25,
okay.
that's $7 million.
Okay,
One time. That's the key. One time.
But we're using the 7 million to cover a 3-year debt, but we aren't funding our staff.
okay, so I have a question on the TID closure too. I don't know if you can clarify this, but when we were talking about the extra projects that schools were thinking of doing, and we had taken, I believe we had said we were going to dedicate some of the TID closure to some of the projects at maybe La Follette and Southside and Capitol, I think. Is that the same TID funding? It's a different one.
It is the same TID closure, but it is over 2 fiscal years. So you're correct. We did designate $7.5 million for La Follette, Capitol High School, Badger Rock, and Southside Elementary. The second portion of that TID closure is payable next year, and that's the 7 million I just referenced.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I just didn't want to have that get lost in the process. Appreciate the clarification. Okay, are there other questions? Okay, let's go ahead.
All right, thank you, Board Member Gomez Schmidt. If we can go to the next slide, appreciate it.
So as construction progresses, we do want to talk just a little bit about communications. So this is a slide that we presented at the last operations work group update in February. So this describes some of the strategies that we'll be collaborating with to provide updates to the external and internal stakeholders. To get into a little bit more detail about what's been happening recently, I'd like to go to the next slide. So our team has been working with the Mmsd communications team to work on construction and project signage and phasing communications. So because these projects will impact the schools during the school year, portions of the schools will be off limits due to construction. Communication is going to be critical to maintaining safety, which is of paramount importance to us. So we have been working on developing the materials for next fall so they can be distributed this spring. So that before students leave, they will understand what they will be coming back to next fall, and staff will as well. So that's one thing that our teams have been working on. In addition, on the next slide, we've started to play out some neighborhood flyers. So our team has gone out with some door hangers to residences directly around the schools to inform them of the construction and also provide them some communication channels if they have questions or concerns. There have been some social media posts updating both about the project, but also some engagement. You can see a photo in this slide of a presentation at West High School about the projects. We're also going to be starting with our construction updates. So this will be the first week that we'll be issuing a 2-page summary with details and photographs talking about each project. This week we'll focus on West High School, and then we'll have a rotation coming out in the subsequent weeks for all the other projects. And then finally, there's a groundbreaking event being planned, and there will be some details forthcoming on this. This is in the works right now, and there's some details still being confirmed, but that is forthcoming.
Next slide. Dan.
Good evening, Honorable Board. This is Dan Ringo. Just a quick update on some of the spring-summer referendum construction moves. Last week, we had the LMC of a pilot, which was completed. The Memorial Music Room for abatement work is complete, so there was an internal move there. So, should be completed at East as of this report, as well as all the required materials such as boxing, shipping material, and labels, so they're color-coded, so that when items are moved, we know exactly where they're going and exactly where they'll be put back when the Findorf team is completed with their construction. The following week, we will be doing our athletic equipment and chemical moves from the facilities to designated areas in the district. And as we provide updates throughout the summer, we'll have more picture. What we provided was a quick collage of some of the work that's ongoing in the designated schools, and we're providing more so you can see our updates and progress as we proceed throughout the summer. Thank you.
All right, next slide. Board Member Gomez-Schmidt, I see Board Member Pearson's hand up. Would you like for us to pause or continue?
Yes, that would be great. Board Member Pearson, you have a question?
I just had a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I just had a question around the communication. I know that you are doing communication just around the schools that are having the construction, but there are certain areas and neighborhoods that attend those schools and children that come in from different parts of the area. So my question is just of how are you engaging, I guess, the larger city in neighborhoods that utilize those high schools in the process of communicating the information that's needed.
Thank you for the question. Also, I just want to clarify the engagement around the communities directly around the high schools pertains specifically to the impacts those houses may see, whether it's noises, whether it's parking, that sort of thing that won't, it's more of an indirect impact to the project. The construction updates, the social media posts, all those items that are really intended for the parents, the staff, the students, those will be distributed through the normal channels and should reach the entire community as well as all of the staff and students that utilize those respective schools.
And Board Member Pearson, I would also add in if Tim Lamons wants to speak briefly on MMSD's direct communication, I think that will be helpful to support Aaron as well.
Thank you, Cedric. Yeah, we will be leveraging our social media and communicating with our news media here in Madison as we follow the construction schedule and keep people informed. We'll also have information on our website that we will be linking people to, and direct mail campaigns to keep people informed.
All right, thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
All right, next slide. All right, thank you, Alyssa. So some noteworthy building services update that we are extremely excited about. I want to take a small pause here. I have to highlight some of the team members here. Nick Guerra, who I would really like for him to present some of the hard work that the grounds team has done. Over 45 projects here you'll hear him talk about, and the impact to kids alone. And then ultimately we have a message from our scholars. Nick, do you mind, next slide, do you mind sharing with the team? I want you to share with what your team has done, because this has been an awesome task. This is state-of-the-art equipment. We are so excited about this. And Nick, I don't want to steal your thunder, so I'm gonna let you go ahead. Nick.
No, you're good. So I just want to give you a quick update on our playground project. So like Cedric said, we're working on 45, close to 45, if not more, playground projects. On the screen, you'll see Albion, which has been completed. It was actually just completed on Monday. Shank Elementary Phase 1, which was completed in end of March. And then you'll see Sherman Middle School. And we can go to the next slide. I can give you some more information. So completed right now is Jefferson, which is actually the bottom picture. Wright Middle School, Shank Elementary Phase 1, Sherman Middle School Phase 1, Albion Elementary School, and Toki Middle School. Right now, we are in the process of installing at Emerson, removing at Lakeview, and we have to do wood chips at Frank Alice. So those should be done very soon. Our next two that we're starting up with are Thoreau Elementary and Hawthorne Elementary, which should start within the next week or two. You can go to the next slide. One thing we looked at with playgrounds was inclusive and accessible play. So you'll see in a lot of our newer structures, you'll see port and play surfacing, which is the rubber surfacing, which is easier for some scholars to get across. Additional inclusive play equipment. So if you look like in the top right, you'll see Shank's Phase 2, and you'll see there's something called the Weevil Round, which has port and play surfacing, which allows scholars of all types to get aboard and be involved. It's inclusive, so everybody at the school has an opportunity to play. The new structure is designed with transfer points, so you'll see like a lot of schools, there's a point on the structure that allows scholars with different abilities to get onto the structure and be involved with their classmates. We have port and play surfacing going to a lot of those transfer points to make it as easily accessible as possible. There's also accessible surface elements, so musical instruments, panels they can play with on the ground that are nearby. So we tried to make the structures as accommodating to everybody as we could. And Alyssa, you can go to the next slide.
All right, thank you. And listen, before we hit play, Board Member Vandermillen, we heard you loud and clear. I think several questions arise. Will our ADA accessibility kids have an opportunity to play? As you can see, this has been in the planning stages, and we will make sure that I want to thank Dr. Jenkins for making sure that we stick to this vision, as well as the many board members who have also shared with us. And here's a quick message from our scholars. I think this is the heart of our project here, and this is what I think we all live for. Alyssa, do you mind sharing this message from our scholars to our board members?
Thank you. Thank you. I want to thank the school district for giving us this new playground. And what I love about this playground is going on the rings. And what I love doing on the rings is doing gymnastics. And this is what I like to do. Thank you, school board, for our playground. for buying us this playground. My favorite part of this is the slide and the spinner. Thank you, school board, for the new playground. I like the monkey bars. Thank you, school board. I love the new spinner.
All right, thank you for that heartfelt video. As you can see, our scholars really appreciate you, school board members. Board Chair Mojo, we have heard you loud and clear, making sure that you want equity in all of our projects. And just to hear that, hopefully it's a refreshing opportunity for you all, just giving you thanks as well. I'll transition the slides. If you want me to pause, Board Member Gomez-Smith, and we only have 3 slides left where I can push through to the end.
No, I think we can continue, but thank you very much for that video.
All right, thank you. I'll transition back to Nick to talk about some beautification projects and asphalt. We'll transition over to Nick again, and then Sabette in the last slide. Nick.
All right, so another thing we're working on is beautification of our schools. So we want people to feel good about the schools, and we're trying to do that. So we've done some work at Doyle. You can see we did some work for the Henderson renaming ceremony. We completed a project in Mendota last year. We plan on starting at Lapham, Chavez, and Holtzman just to do some well-needed maintenance to the buildings that's been neglected for quite some time. So we're hoping our schools are looking really good from the outside very shortly. Let's go to the next slide. We will be starting asphalt projects in June. Yes, June 13th, we'll be starting our first asphalt project. We're going to start with Mendota, rolling to Sherman, then Leopold, then Marquette, then Spring Harbor. So there's a total, I think, of 18 asphalt projects that'll be going on this summer. And so a lot of our lots that are in disrepair with potholes that have trip hazards and or water puddles and creates ice. Hopefully we're going to address a lot of that pretty quick here. Next slide.
Good evening, board members. Svetlin Borisov with Facilities Maintenance. Nice segue, Nick, to the eliminating trip hazards. My team has been working on a district-wide concrete repairs, which will include eliminating trip hazards, addressing any imperfections to our concrete infrastructure, stairways, staircases, ADA ramps. We were very blessed to be given the opportunity to work with our contracted vendors to start these processes. We are finalizing the details on phase 1, and we are preparing for another phase because the secured funding will not touch all of the needs that we have in the school district. So in the upcoming Board of Education meeting, we will be talking about phase 2 and what we are planning to do with that project. Along with that, we are working on finalizing phase 1 of masonry repairs at Lowell School. This included repairs to lintels and pointing of the courtyard of the school. We have prepared a second phase, and we will be bringing it up for approvals in the upcoming Board of Education meeting in May. We are hoping with searching when we are applying for approval for that second phase, we want to address the front and the sides of the facade of that building so that we can minimize the water infiltration that currently exists in the building. Along with that, as we are getting into the summer season, we will be starting a HVAC overhaul project at Midvale, which will include upgrading terminal equipment throughout the building. And it also will be touching some plumbing upgrades for the building. In the summertime, we also will be working on Shorewood corridor flooring and restroom upgrades. In the summer, we'll be helping MSCR with their lakeside build out. And we are currently wrapping up a district-wide bottle filling station project. We are 85% completed. And we have another 15% to wrap up this project, which will be done by the end of June this year.
All right, thank you, Svetlin. And board members, we'll close on that and open up for any questions, but I want to just underscore a couple key points that we wanted to make very clear. Building services is working very hard to make sure that we upkeep our district. We know that this may not necessarily be the sexy portion of conversation, but our buildings is in disrepair, and we must develop a path. And I would love to work with the board. I'd love to continue to work with the superintendent, and ensuring that the vision of having career-ready places, thriving environments, and the conditional spaces in which our kids can learn is equally important. I must underscore that fact. This is very important. We're functioning off of a PRA. Is the consultant who gave us a facilities conditional report as of 2016, 2017. And we would like to continue a slow, progressive upgrade throughout the district. We know finances are strained, but I highly implore you to continue to work with building services so that we can find a path forward in ensuring our buildings are safe and secure long-term. I want to thank the board for the presentation. I want to thank Dr. Jenkins for his support, his day-by-day tutelage, and understanding the vision and ensuring that you have the best for this community and our scholars. Once again, on behalf of my entire team, we appreciate you and all that you do. Thank you, and that concludes our presentation.
Right, thank you, Mr. Huddle. Are there any questions?
I just have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead. Board Member Nichols.
I almost unmuted. Mr. Hodo, I want to thank you and your entire team for a really thorough update. I personally am thrilled to see the work that you all are doing, just even with the playgrounds. Because for too long in our district, usually we've had PTOs doing fundraising, making donations for playgrounds, and that's worked well for some schools, but not for others. And so I really am happy to see just a key investment from our district to make sure that playgrounds are accessible and safe and updated across our district, as well as many of the other building and facility upgrades that you all are attending to. So thank you very much for that. Can you just say one quick thing about the water filling stations? I saw it on the slide, but did you say that those are going district-wide in this next school year, or is that phased out over a few years?
Yeah. In a nutshell, I have Savetland to speak on it. We've already did phase one on the water bottling stations. There was a backlog, supply chain shortage. We recently got more in, and I think Savetland and his team is progressively installing them. A lot of these have to be installed where there are mechanical lines, there are plumbing issues, the electrical issues as well that we have to change over. But I'll have Savetland to speak quickly on the water filling station project phase two.
What we are currently working on is actually implementing the replacement of the water filling stations. So we have completed the demolition of the existing ones, and we are currently working on installing the new stations. So we have completed 85% of the work already, and we have the upcoming month and a half, I would say, to finalize that project. And I think we are still on track on this. We did run into several issues in some of the schools where we needed to do a more additional demo in order to make the installations possible. But we are still on track with that project, and I'm very optimistic about its conclusion by the end of the fiscal year this year.
Thank you, Sven.
And one last follow-up. You know, in this, I believe in this school year, correct me if I'm wrong, there was an investment in an idea that had come forward from students, the bleeding shamelessly, access to the menstrual products. I saw that was in the budget for 21-22 as kind of a one-time thing. I know that isn't exactly facilities updates, but I am curious what you've learned about that, and do you see that moving forward in any way as part of our facility updates?
Absolutely. Project leader on this one is Alyssa. I'll ask Alyssa to come off camera. But board member Nichols, this is absolutely important. My team has put forth a dedicated effort to ensure that our schools are outfitted with the necessary needs for those students. Alyssa is the project champion for this. Alyssa, if you want to give a quick update, I appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm working on this project with Angela Moss on the operations side. So at this point, we have enough dispensers that we were able to cover the middle schools specifically. We have dispensers in stock to cover the high schools as those bathroom renovations go through the referendum. So we didn't want to mount the brand new dispensers that we bought with the project money and then pull them right back off the wall. We've actually had an interesting situation where there have been some elementary schools that have requested dispensers in their building because it's a need that they've identified with their students. So we are piloting a few of those in elementary schools, and we'd love to expand the program if that's something that makes sense for the building. And we do have the budget to continue stocking the machines that we have purchased. So that'll be an ongoing project. But yeah, they're free dispensers. They're great. It has a timer, like anyone can come in and access, and then our custodians are dedicated to keeping them stocked.
And Board Member Nichols, what you'll see is the fund and resources to continue to supply that. No student should feel ashamed that they don't have enough equipment to take care of themselves, and rest assured we have it in select locations throughout every school.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yes, I'm thrilled on the blue shaver sleeve. The other thing I'd like in the future is, and it's something which not always discussed, is adult changing stations, because we have individuals with disabilities that are 16, 17, 18, up to age 21 years old, who need to often be changed by an aide. Oftentimes those rooms, as we unfortunately found out this past few years, are not private. Sometimes they need to be, but also sometimes you have an emergency and need to use the bathroom and something happens. I think we need to eventually invest in a few of those. So that way, for those students with incontinent needs or those students who need to be changed or choose to be, that they have that option.
Very important. Thank you, Vanderman, Board Member Vanderman. Duly noted. I'll follow back up with you with a plan of action.
I think that the referendum projects are going to be very, very well equipped to, like, especially at East, I'm thinking about the way that the individual toilets were configured and the changing stations were configured. Like, it's very dispersed throughout the building so that no student is in a situation where they have to walk through a whole building to get to a space. That's for them. So.
Okay, we have one more comment.
This will be my final one.
For Nichols.
To my board colleagues. So earlier when we discussed the budget, I had asked about social emotional learning and the wellness centers. And so I am curious, are the wellness centers being built into the referendum projects, or is it less of an actual space and more about the kind of support and services that are happening out of a dedicated area? Can somebody say a little bit more about that?
Listen, if Dr. Ayers is on board, she may be prepared. And I think if Aaron's here, I appreciate it. Dr. Ayers, go ahead.
Yeah, you bet. I can take the start of this. So our first year, which will be next school year, our focus is really on getting therapists in the building and then planning and preparing for full implementation of wellness centers. Actually, just in this meeting tonight, I was emailing about the space that is required for that. And we will have to have conversations with schools to be sure that those spaces are identified and continue to be available. At this point, we're not necessarily looking at any large scale recommendations related to the referendum and the wellness centers, but certainly next year in our planning year, we're going to have to look at financial implications, space implications, et cetera, and collaborate with building services to address.
Thank you.
Board President Muldrow, and then I see your hand, Gordon.
Yeah, so my first question is for Ross. Ross, we were able to create significant savings by getting a historically low interest rate when we first brought these projects out to lenders. Can you talk about how that cost savings in terms of interest rate is factored in as a way to mitigate, the overage we're seeing due to inflation?
Are you talking specifically about the interest rates for the borrowings?
Yes.
So unfortunately, the savings we saw on the first borrowing for our low interest rate and the action we took last month become part of our debt structure. They don't actually generate savings that can then be reinvested into the construction projects themselves. They become part of the payment schedule that becomes part of our Fund 39 tax levy. So we actually are still borrowing the original amount, the $106 million for the project, but any premiums we receive on that borrowing or interest rates below expectations from the original scope goes into tax levy savings, not project funding, unfortunately.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, Ross. My next question is specific to cost savings as well, although I'm going to direct this question at Cedric. Cedric, the board committed to sustainability and being a carbon-free school a couple of times in 2019. Can you talk to me about how we're embracing sustainability and how that strategy in the long term creates cost savings in terms of energy?
Yeah, excellent question. I think Savetlin and Aaron, if you would come off screen right fast, I think they'll be more than welcome to address some of those efficiencies, energy efficiencies goals. Aaron, if you want to start off, and we'll pass it over to Savetlin.
So with respect to sustainability, the most notable component of the referendum is the additional $2 million the board elected to add to the base referendum. About half of that is going to fund solar. The other half of that is going to fund other amenities. Some of them are vehicle charging, and there are some other undefined things that will be worked out throughout the project as well. This does supplement the base scope, but those are probably the most notable items to discuss with respect to the referendum.
What do we anticipate those items will generate in cost savings related to energy? Or will those items generate cost savings in terms of energy and expense to the district?
I will have to get back to you on that. I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
Thank you. I think it'd be really helpful to understand how moving towards sustainability obviously is going to cost us a decent amount up front. But in the long run, one, we want our kids to have an environment and air and clean water, and those things are things that are worth investing in. And also, there is significant cost savings related to renewable energy that I think is important to highlight and emphasize in these conversations. The next thing I want to ask about is specific to kind of where we're at. So we're 90% bid out. Cedric, you talked about the areas where we've identified kind of $11 million in inflation, and then the additional $9 million in added scope. The risk factor that folks seem to think would be the greatest risk factor is, as we're kind of really getting into this work, discovering that there's additional work. And you've said our buildings are on average 50 years old, which means we do have buildings that are, pretty close to 100 or over 100 years old. What do we anticipate that cost could look like? Because I think, there is a chance that you're going to come back to us and say, wait, we're not $28 million over, we're $45 million over. So when will we be at the point in the process where that discovery portion of risk is, completely understood and can come back to the board?
Yeah, very wonderful question, Board Member Mojo. If Mike Huffman can come back, and I know Aaron as well, but what we stated earlier is we're roughly about 95%. What we see is what we see. And on the slide that we had earlier, we had roughly from 0 to 4%. All the major ticket items we have pretty much identified. There is a chance that we will find more options, more items, more things as we begin to knock down walls, the buildings that are close to 100 years old. We do have contingency for some things, but we want to be realistic with our approach. We will make sure we work very closely with Ross and identify this with Dr. Jenkins. Anything that we see, we are traveling unknown territories, to be honest with you. Mike can speak a little bit closer on some of the things that we've done so far just to mitigate these potential things. And Mike, if you want to just share a quick high overview of where we think we'll land, I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I might use as an example a project that my company has worked with over the last couple of years. It's similar in that it's a renovation of historic structures. So the Shorewood School District embarked on a major referendum project. We've been helping them manage it. And the kinds of things that we discover in an older building can largely be code-related items. We might get into a space, open up a wall, find some plumbing that comes through the space, and that plumbing isn't up to current code. Of course, it wasn't constructed to today's code, but as you do significant renovations to those structures, along the way, you have to bring some of those things up to code. Now, those are hidden things. Our architect and engineering designers can't see those things, and we can't anticipate it. We might find electrical conduits that aren't properly supported. We might find outdated structured cabling within your buildings that has to be updated. So those are the kinds of risks that we see. But I think the point I tried to make earlier is that in today's current market conditions, a lot of that risk was in the bidding, and that piece is behind us. So as we sit and we project forward, we're saying that could be 0 to 4%. That was on one of our slides. So that's kind of a range that we hope if we do discover things that we're in that range.
Thank you so much for that update. I want to end my comments by saying I really greatly appreciate getting to see our young people playing. I think embracing play-based learning is something that speaks to the mental health needs of our young people at this point, that allows for us to take advantage of the acreage of this district. So thank you for naming that we have over 750 acres as a district. That's really rare for a major metropolitan school district, and it's something that I think we should take full advantage of. I hope that as you continue to bring updates to this board, that you will make similar videos that emphasize how the way we have renovated our schools allow for our young people to embrace learning in new and interesting ways. I think our young people are deeply impacted by the spaces they spend their entire days in. And I think, really talking about the ways in which these renovations allow for us to enhance our students' overall learning experience and their achievement academically will be something where we'll be really grateful to be able to capture and share with our community. And with that said, I have no further questions. Thank you so much, Cedric.
Okay, thank you. Gordon.
Yes, I have a question. I have just 3 statements after that. So for my question, what are we going to do regarding like all gender bathrooms? I know recently at an East meeting that I was at, some students brought up an issue with the lack of all gender bathrooms. So I'm just wondering if there's like any information on that.
Gordon, what we'll do is probably get you more of a comprehensive report. I think we are working on that. It is part of our renovation, particularly our referendum schools. I know Alyssa has a detailed map, but we'll be able to get that to you. I think Dr. Esser has some messages around it as well. Dr. Esser.
Yeah, I'll just add that, and actually at East is one of the schools. We're also open to when schools have an immediate need, working with them and problem solving on a temporary solution, at least converting existing restrooms. So we never want space to be a primary driver of that decision. So we do offer opportunities to problem solve with schools to try to figure it out too.
Okay. And then for my 3 statements, first, I just want to say I really appreciate how inclusive you all try to be, especially with the playgrounds, especially for those who may not be able-bodied. Also, appreciate the sustainability, how you all like trying to incorporate sustainability into your decisions. You did notice how you try to get top-notch quality for playground equipment. I imagine that would be the same criteria for all other materials that goes into your construction. And I think that's the smart thing to do, because you don't want to keep revisiting projects and keep doing updates and all that thing. You want to get something very durable, sustainable now. Lastly, I really did appreciate how you all try to like recycle materials as much as possible. I think that's one of the most cost-efficient things you can do. Also, the most green things you can do as well. As board members have said, it's still important to ensure that we are saving in the long run, and then that we don't have to have such drastic costs in the long run. But it seems like you all you all know what you're doing, and you're doing a really good job at it. So thank you.
Yeah, I'll certainly shift over to Savetlan. I don't think he had an opportunity to speak on some of his sustainability efforts, from geothermal boilers to our energy efficiency goals as of 2040. Savetlan.
Thank you, Cedric. I just wanted to update this group on what we are doing in terms of sustainability. So me and my team are currently working on a comprehensive energy grant, which is taking the Board of Education resolution from 2019 to have 100% renewable energy by 2040. And we are taking actually that resolution and looking into what is the practical implications and what it will look like to implement this to our buildings. So we are working with a couple of our consultants on creating the roadmap, how we will get there. We are also looking into creating a comprehensive long-range facilities plan. And as the first step in that plan, we are currently designing 4 projects, which include renewable sources of energy. And that's not only solar, it's more on the heavy duty end, the HVAC operations. So we are designing heating and cooling systems for 4 schools, which is Sherman Shabazz, Blackhawk Gompers, Miele Nana, and Crestwood. We are designing geothermal systems that will provide heating and air conditioning to the building. So these are the first steps in our long-range facilities plan, but we do have the sustainability in our mind. And in the upcoming month, we will be updating the Board of Education on what that roadmap will look like to get to our renewable energy goals, how much it will cost, and we will be seeking collaboration and support to carry out the mission.
Absolutely. Thank you, Savetlan. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Jenkins or Board Member Gomez-Smith.
Yeah, Board Member Castro, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much. Consistently throughout this whole year, we have heard that mental health is a huge thing that has come up for our students and staff. I was wondering if y'all can talk about how you have incorporated sensory design into our buildings that is conducive for mental health.
Sensory designs. Alyssa, if you come back off, Aaron, if you may want to speak to anything that we've done to incorporate mental health in the design.
And if you're
phase.
all right, Cedric, I may actually tee up Jackie
Okay.
to answer that question if she's available.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie.
I think.
Oh, we cannot hear you for some reason.
We can't hear you, Jackie. Or maybe she can't hear us.
Hey, Jackie, you're on mute. We can't hear her. Board Member Castro, if we can't get Jackie back, Jackie's our architect who did all the planning around wayfaring, color schemes, transition points, etc. We'll get a detailed response back to you in a written format, if that's okay. If we can't get Jackie back.
And then just one last question. I know that during this, the whole process, the board has really stressed how we want to incorporate like student and community-led art, more green spaces, indoors and outdoors, as well as spaces that can be used by the community throughout the whole year. I was wondering how the community, especially with art, will have a chance to participate as these designs or the construction gets underway, and then emphasizing the communication aspect with the community is really important for that.
Yep, absolutely. I think we've addressed the communication plan. We're very solid on the direction, how we're communicating from Fendorf's team all the way over to Mmsd's direct team. Jackie, if Jackie's back on.
Hi, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yes, my headset is dying, so my apologies for that. I'm going to go back to mental health. Is that, I'll go back to that question. So I think part of what we're doing is is providing flexibility. I think everyone learns in a different way. So providing large and small spaces that allow for flexibility in both maybe one-on-one learning as well as large group learning can give you it just gives you peace of mind to know that you can learn in the best way possible. I think also by working through, can you still hear me? I'm sorry.
We can hear you.
It keeps going flashing red at me. I'm sorry. I think providing gender neutral restrooms also, we're providing lots of aspects to the building that again allow for choice. And I think in my mind that provides a lot of mental health to provide choice in every aspect of spending time in your school building, because as we know, students and staff are spending the majority of their life in those beginning years in school.
Got it. Thank you. And just one last follow-up comment. I mean, even small things such as lighting or smell can have a huge difference on someone's engagement, as well as sunlight throughout the whole building. So thank you so much for that answer and your work.
Savion, I could actually answer that. Elizabeth, I can't remember her last name, when I went with Mr. Hodo during the space for the referendum, they discussed on how they're doing different colored tiles to break it up and to increase the amount of windows and natural light, especially in the atrium. We focused a lot, they stated a lot of that to make sure that not just individuals with disabilities, but individuals of all types would be able to experience all parts of the environment.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And just a request for me and a comment, Mr. Hodo, I just want to thank you and the entire team that is doing all this incredible work on the referendum projects and also the day-to-day work in keeping our buildings maintained. I'm very interested in again, finding out more about our long-term facility planning. One of the things that was top of mind last week was our HVAC systems in our old buildings and the plan that we're going to have going forward to deal with that, right? And I'm glad to hear that's happening with 4 more schools over the summer. All that will be added with our 6 referendum projects. And so, but I'm very interested in, I guess, the timeline and coming back to the board with both that sustainability, the comprehensive energy plan, and then also taking another look at the long range facilities plan and the investment that's going to be needed to update our aging facilities.
Well, I'll certainly work very closely with Ross and Dr. Jenkins on preparing this. I know Ross was swamped with the budget. I'll be more than welcome to come back probably maybe in the fall, give us a roughly 60 days or so. The summer is extremely busy for the entire team. This is very time consuming. We are laser focused on this. We have a starting point. I just think about getting it in a comprehensive way that the board can understand, and then tagging in Ross and his team and finding a financial path. We have a lot of work to do, and I want to make sure the board understands clearly. Conservative estimate, you're talking billions. We have a lot of schools that are aging. This recent heat wave showcased the impact on education and how severely it could occur. So I would just strongly encourage that my entire team will work in getting this for you. This is high on our radar. Dr. Jenkins has asked us to be laser focused on giving him a plan. I intend on fulfilling that by the fall of this year. We'll get it to you.
And that is recognizing all of the referendum work that you are doing on top of our regular facilities work. So I just want to say a huge thank you and shout out to the team for all of the work that is happening to make this happen. And then just my last comment, as we move through this, it's going into heavy construction this summer, and that is going to be happening next school year and the following school year. So we're going to have 2 school years where students are in our high schools, and there is also construction going on. So just my request going forward is just that we really engage the teachers and staff and students in the buildings to make sure that everything we're doing is workable to still have in learning environments that they can participate in going forward, and that we can also get the referendum work done side by side.
Absolutely. Duly
Thank you
noted.
so much. All right, Dr. Jenkins, you had a few comments to wrap us up.
Yeah, just very brief. First of all, I just want to say to you all as board members, you led this work. This was a historical referendum that we passed and you were committed. All the things came up tonight about the long range plan, the sustainability, all these things about arts in our building, about different spaces in our community. And so for me, this is kind of like celebratory that we're on pace to do what we said. And I hope that you also notice the talent we have in this department now. These new individuals coming in, bringing the skill sets, and they're working, they're serious on the South Side, our schools, involving the community in the whole planning process. This is what you envision. So you're to be celebrated tonight, and I appreciate all the staff, students in our community, and I thank them for passing this referendum. Now, as we're leaning forward this year, we're also beginning to build momentum, and I hope you heard this tonight. In the budget is tight. Budget situation, Ross did a fabulous job of continuing to explain it to us. And then we're finishing up here with the whole piece with our referendum commitment. I want our community to know we're very serious about doing what we said we were going to do. And the inflation cost, that's there, but it's very transparent. Everything that we're doing, we're going to do our very best to deliver on our referendum promise. I just want to, Cindy Green wanted to end this about 1 minute. This is all about your work, what you've done, the investments you've made. And we're not done yet. It's just picking up momentum, step by step.
There's supposed to be music.
Sound.
Okay.
These are the things we've committed to, we've been doing. Sounds like. Thank you. No, the sound I didn't hear, but we're building momentum moving forward based on the vision you've laid out. And thank you for your laser-like focus in the meeting too. Ms. Goldman-Smith says you've been pushing us with questions too. So thank you to all.
Very much appreciate the presentation. As a mother of three, I even appreciate the silence.
Before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I just want to recognize Gordon. I wanted to check and see if this is your last meeting with us. We did sort of announce that at the beginning. Are you going to be with us next week? Or not?
I plan on to. I do not think I report for the ad hoc committee.
Okay, then I won't say goodbye to you at this point then. Thank you for being with us tonight. And with that, we'll see you soon. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All right. Gordon, your advisory vote?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.